All right, people, welcome to another edition of the New Breed Podcast, the world's best podcast about new metal, because it's not just music, it's a lifestyle. I'm one half of your hosting duo, Jay Horsecow, bright and early in the day. I'm 3 Mountain Dews deep. With me, I have my partner in crime, the notorious TIM, Tim Anderson Jr. Tim, how's it going?
Great. Loving this weather.
I hate this weather. I'm too fat. It's too hot. I want to move somewhere where it's cold. And joining us for this week's episode, we have a special guest joining us from across the Atlantic. We have the publisher of the Nu Zine and the upcoming book, which I started to talk about before the show, but I'd rather just save for the show, Mr. Matt Karpe. Matt, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to it.
We are very, very glad to have you as our first international guest. Now I'm slowly introducing Tim into recording in off hours. I don't know if Tim will do the, hey, Tim, we got to get up at 3 a.m. to talk to a guest in Norway. But this is something. This is something. So, hey, Matt, give us a little bit about yourself before we go into like the zine and the book and all that. Like, how did you get involved? I mean, how did you come across the wonderful thing that is nu metal?
Well, I grew up in the era, the original first time round. The first album I ever heard was Follow the Leader by Korn when I was at school. A friend lent me that and the first Slipknot album, and possibly being a little scared of the 9 guys that was on the front of Slipknot's cover, I went for Korn first. And yeah, within the first few minutes of the album, I was just drawn into that heavy music. The first heavy album I'd really heard, apart from Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, really. So obviously it's a completely different.
Yeah, you went a little bit left there.
Absolutely, yeah. So from then, just spending time around friends, watching the music channels. We have Kerrang TV over here. Well, it's not as good as it used to be, but we also had MTV2 then, and I think Scuzz started just afterwards. So I was able to see all these videos of, Korn and Deftones and Limp Bizkit and Slipknot coming up, and then the second wave of bands as well. And yeah, just completely drawn into that the diversity of the music. I've always called nu metal a movement rather than a genre, because obviously the amount of different sounds coming through. And buying Kerrang magazine every week, that was the only way I could find out about these new bands, because unlike you guys over there, we wasn't given as much exposure to what I call the second and third tier bands. So that was the only way of really finding out about them before I was actually able to first get a computer and the internet.
And I remember actually being jealous of you guys over there because of things like Kerrang and things like Metal Hammer, because when Tim and I remember, we had virtually no print media that was touching this stuff. The stuff like Rip, the stuff like Metal Hammer, Metal Maniacs.
Yeah, Hip Raider.
But they really weren't touching on it. They were, it's that looking down your nose shit that we've talked about numerous times, where they kind of looked at it as like, and you said it best, Matt, it really wasn't a genre, it was a movement, right? Because there was so much. And absolutely. I remember going to Barnes & Noble every 6 weeks on the dot on a Tuesday to get the newest issue of Metal Hammer. And I remember being totally jazzed when they did the issue on Ozfest 97. Max Cavalera was on the cover, and the pictures inside were the pictures from the Giant Stadium show I was at. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, I wish I had known. I would have found the guy, with the press badge. But yeah, so you remember back in the day, and you say follow the leader. So this is when this stuff was getting airplay. Like, it wasn't relegated to like back basements and opening for bands where they were booing them. Korn famously talks about their tour opening for Ozzy. So you remember back when it was a thing.
Absolutely, yeah. I missed out in terms of sort of, obviously from 98 to 2000 was where it really took off, especially in America. But I noticed that from late 2000, early 2001, when Linkin Park and Papa Roach came up, that was when it really took over here, and especially in terms of the mainstream charting albums. Stains' Break the Cycle getting to number 1 over here, which I thought was crazy. He was able to pick up Limp Bizkit, Korn, Linkin Park, Deftones in the sort of music shops that only stock chart music, because they were getting in the charts. It helped for me, because obviously I live in a small town, so I didn't have a record shop nearby that I could go to and buy these CDs, so I had to rely on them. And thankfully, because of nu metal, I was able to get the new albums sort of week in, week out.
Was Linkin Park big over there when they first came out?
Yeah, I think it took 2 or 3 of their singles to come out before they really hit. I think In the End was the big breakthrough for them.
Gotcha.
And then after that, I don't think Hybrid Theory did especially well initially, but once In the End was the one that broke through, then everybody went back, and then Kerrang started replaying Paper Cut music video. One Step Closer was very popular. And that is I do think it was with Linkin Park, but that's what opened the gates to everything else over here.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
It is kind of wild how things will go from east to west and west to east.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because when you think about it, right, punk rock had its basis in some of the Motown and Detroit stuff. So it went over to the UK, it came back with the Sex Pistols, it went back over with Sick of It All. You know what I mean? Like how that stuff bounces back and forth. We exported nu metal to the UK and to Europe, whereas Europe and the UK exported back to us trance, club, house, all that sort of electronic stuff comes from, right? Well, it's not terrible. Like chill out music, at least I will say this. I like chill out music, but one of the primary differences to me between nu metal and some of the other extreme stuff that Tim and I get into is you can't listen to Cannibal Corpse for 2 hours in a row. You'd turn out to be like Ted Bundy, right? You lose your mind. But you can listen to a medley of nu metal for hours on end. And not only do you not get bored, but it really doesn't make you like crazy. Like I think people miss that there was a musicianship to it, right? Like Linkin Park wrote great songs. Tim and I just had an episode where we talked about it. Korn wrote some good music, and you can listen to that at an extended clip because it's not all like, I don't know how Corpse Grinder plays live, right? Growling for that extent, right? I mean, God bless him.
Yeah, and like we said, in terms of being so diverse, I mean, just Deftones, for example, you can just listen to their music for hours because they're so different. But yeah, if there was certain bands that did perhaps replicate their sound song after song, at least with nu metal, you was perhaps getting a gothic rock track from Godhead, for example, followed by an industrial electro song from Orgy, a little bit of rap rock from Crazy Town, going up full to Korn and Slipknot. So yeah, I think that does help to, it's. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like nu metal. They never did, and they still don't now. But I don't really, as a music fan of that era, I don't know how it could bypass so many people because there was just so much great music, so many great bands, and the musicianship, like you said, the cohesiveness of it. For me, it's impossible not to like. But I know everybody has their own feelings of.
Some of it, I think, is snobbery, right, Matt? Some of it is snobbery. Right? Like you have the old guys who, I mean, I'm from the age where when you hit 7th grade, you got a denim jacket, you got a back patch, and that back patch defined you, right? And those guys are looking down their nose at the kids in the Jenkos and the big t-shirts like, well, what is this? I don't get it, right? Almost like Principal Skinner, right? But I think Tim and I, we've been doing some interviews lately with some of the younger bands who have nu metal influences, and to throw a whole genre, a whole movement out, throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there is an entire generation of kids coming up into the more extreme music scene that's what they grew up with. So to denigrate it really doesn't make much sense.
I think the main thing was for what they called themselves true metalheads. I think they just didn't like the fact that heavy music was being put in the mainstream eye. I think they liked it being more underground, their own little thing. And then, all of a sudden they were sharing it with pop fans or hip hop fans. And that's perhaps, I think, what didn't really go down as well. And, a lot of people still call nu metal sort of cheesy as well. And perhaps the lyrical aspects of it, while a lot of the subject matter was deep, to them, they perhaps thought the bands were, I don't know, whether they were less sincere, maybe, trying to use that in terms of getting into people's hearts and stuff like that. So I think that's where the metalheads didn't quite click with nu metal.
I think especially in like Europe, like metal over there is very, very serious, I feel like. So I think nu metal in Europe, like especially like Jay said, like Norway or Finland or some places like that, you say nu metal over there, they're like, no, shut the fuck up, don't ever say that again, kind of thing, because it's such a black metal and death metal haven over there. So when you bring stuff like that over there, it's not, it's fake, or it's, you know, I can't say the word that people used to say back then because you could get away with it back then, but especially over there, they would say a lot of that kind of stuff like that shit.
Yeah.
I'm sure you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I feel like in the States it was more acceptable over here. You know what I mean?
Which kind of is weird if you think about it, because Matt, one of the things that we in the States look on at Europe with envy is when you know, there's that whole festival circuit typically in the summer when we're not locked down from some mutant virus. And
Yeah.
the bills are mixed by default. It's not like here where you have Coachella and it's all like, you know, SoundCloud rappers and anybody who charts on Pitchfork and like, you know, maybe somebody who has pop appeal. Whereas you look at some of the lineups in the European tours, like you have Hatebreed going back to back with someone like Poppy. So like you have, I saw Sleep Token playing on the same day as Meshuggah, right? And then so like Playmo is still bouncing around. So there's, I don't know if it's the European ear is more accepting or maybe they hide their snobbery better. I don't know, right? Because here everybody's like, oh, it has to all be metal. And you know, mixed bills are some of the best shows to go to because a diverse crowd, you can't listen to heavy metal nonstop. You become a lunatic.
Well, it's a way to gain more fans as well.
True. Yeah.
You know, you catch that one person who's like, wait, that kind of sounds cool. And then you get that fan who never liked, you know, say pop or something back. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the American people I spoke to, they always say the same thing about how we have the best festival lineups and stuff like, and even tours in general. But I'm the other way around. I think I should have been. I'm a secret American. I think I should have been born over there because I love your festivals and some of the amazing bills just for, you know, normal club shows tours that go around as well. But yeah, I mean, that's the first time I've really sort of thought in terms of the diverse lineups, you know, in that sense, whereas everybody's just generally talked about how the lineups are stacked. They haven't really gone into the reasons why they think they're better over here. But I do see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, we would have had Download Festival this year. We've got a form of it. They're doing a trial festival. I think it's next weekend. That is generally just British bands because of everything that's going on over here. But yeah, I mean, Download Festival, I think the last time I went, or one of the times I went, I think in one day I saw Bring Me the Horizon, Korn, Limp Bizkit, Pendulum, Motley Crue. So that is, and probably 4 or 5 other bands. Killswitch Engage was there, Stained. So that, yeah, just for that one day, it was completely diverse. But it's, yeah, we've had Download Festival is generally pretty good. I think most people these last 2 or 3 years have been calling for them to freshen things up in terms of the headline front, which also then poses the question: are there any bands that are coming up these days of headliner quality? Still can't. In terms of over here, Korn, I still think they deserve a headline spot for Download because of what they've done over the years. They generally get the second stage main slot if possible, and occasionally they do perhaps their third down from the top on the main stage. But yeah, I know this year, had it have happened, it's now obviously been put back till next year, but off the top of my head, there was about 10 original era nu metal bands that are on that bill. So
it is all starting to come back, right? It's kind of wild to see.
100%, yeah. It's with the new bands, of course. A lot of the original era bands are still going. Head PE are putting out a new EP in a couple of months. Edema are working on new music. I know they've got Ryan Shook as their vocalist these days, but I mean, I loved Edema's first album especially, and their second one. Mushroom Head is still going. Obviously, a lot of those bands are generally down to perhaps one original member, but still, Non-Point are knocking out new music still. So there's still a lot of bands that are, you know, still going from there that still, to me, still have a valuable input in today's music.
So let me ask you, transition the conversation a little bit, Matt, and let me ask you kind of a weird question, but not really weird. It is 2021. What led you to do a zine in 2021, let alone a zine about nu metal, right? Like, I mean, very juxtaposition of things that I never thought I would have seen in 2021. Like the other day, Tim and I were having a discussion about which Limp Bizkit album is better, Chocolate Starfish or Significant Other. It's obviously Chocolate Starfish. And one of the group members posted under that status, I can't believe we're talking about this in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of wild, but where did this come from? Where did this come from?
It's quite funny, actually. So the book that's coming out this year, I wrote 2 versions of a book called Nu Metal Resurgence in 2017 and 2018. The second version of that was basically because the first version, I was too eager to knock it out, probably didn't go as in depth as I wanted to. So the second version, that was, I got some really good interviews in there with original era musicians, more content. That was, I was done with that. But in 2020, I started thinking about doing a third version because so much had happened in those 2 years since. And then in the end, I decided to do the zine instead. So I actually give up on the book. It was only because I got a publishing deal just before Christmas that's why this new Nu Metal book's coming out, the definitive guide. So that is the final one of those. But yeah, in terms of the zine, I've been lucky to have a few followers that will have bought the Nu Metal books. I did do a podcast for a little while with a friend that focused on nu metal. And a few people sort of, they were saying that I was trying, or I was acknowledged for trying to bring nu metal back, I guess, in terms of on the social media. A lot of people do. A lot of people, there's groups and pages and podcasts like yourselves. So with that, I just thought, well, let's just continue writing about what I know about. So that's how the zine came along. So yeah, I've done 3 issues so far. I've just started to work on the 4th because I've just finished 2 books. I've got the Nu Metal book due out in July, and then I've got a book all about Korn coming out at the end of the year. So I'm finally working on the 4th issue of the zine now. So yeah, I mean, I go into newer bands. I have a whole new noise section. So each issue has a set of new bands coming through. Flashback features, so just stuff that I've written myself about certain bands. I managed to get interviews with the original era musicians again as well. New and classic era album reviews, stuff like that, because the main focus of that, the amount of new bands coming through, they need as much exposure as they can get. While podcasts are good and Instagram and Facebook are good, any extra avenues will all help. So that's why, partly why the zine began. So I'm enjoying it. I do everything myself. So I do the writing, the interviews, the design. Not the most professional design, if anybody.
No, but I mean, I got all 3 here. You can't see because of my fake background.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
I got all 3. That
Awesome.
I mean, I thought the to start off the first issue, you had a great interview with Mikey Doling from Snob.
Yes.
Where that was the first time where I ever knew that the music that was on the Lynn Strait tribute album was music that they were getting ready for their next album. Right? That was the music without the lyrics, and that he was not happy with that whole idea doing that album. And I didn't even know that. To me, I'm sitting there reading this, and I was like, wow, like. Oh, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, it was funny actually because when I was thinking about doing a 3rd issue, I did get a few interviews together ahead of time, and Mikey's would have been for the book. Obviously, when I put that idea to bed, I hit up Mikey again and said, can I use this for a zine? Which he let me. As it turns out, the new book that comes out, Mikey's interview is in there as well. As is, you've got John Wysocki's interview there from Stained. In that 3rd issue of the zine, Mike Sarkissian from Spineshank, he was originally in my Resurgence book, so we went back and had another chat and sort of got a bit more information, which is in that zine and also going to be in the book. So yeah, I'm like any other nu metal fan. There's things I'd like to hear, and there's always interesting stories that you haven't sort of heard. And yeah, if I can get them from musicians, then great. And hopefully the readers of those zines, I don't print too many of them, but if people do want to pick one up, hopefully they like what they see in there, and the feedback has been pretty good.
So you're like hand stapling them and all that stuff?
Oh, but no, well, yeah, apart from that bit, I do actually have a printers that do that, and that's how they turn out so nice. Yeah, so I know in terms of, I joined a zine group on Facebook just to try and help with promotion, and obviously I was watching a lot of those, and they do print them themselves and staple themselves. But no, I do actually use a company for that.
Cool.
Pretty cheap, but as Jay can hopefully see from the quality of
Tim,
they are really good.
Yeah, next time I come down, I'll bring my copies. You see, they're legit. It's printed on high gloss stock, and it's put together. It's it's imagine this, the hardcore zines that we grew up with, but somebody actually took some time to put some quality to them. It's not like, you know, like
it's not like a newspaper.
Yeah, like
No.
you and I, and like it's like Kinko's at like 3 a.m, hand stapling newspaper. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
there's some quality there. So let me ask you this, Matt. When you think of, and I know this is a hot topic because I see this pop up all the time. Anywhere that I see nu metal mentioned is when you have to think of the waves of nu metal, right? First wave, second wave, third wave. You personally, where do you start drawing those lines? Where do you say, okay, this is where the first, but the baton gets handed off from the first wave to the second wave, and this is where then the second goes to third. Where do you start putting that?
Yeah. So in terms of the corn book, which I've just written, I touch on there that I believe the first real wave of nu metal hit when Follow the Leader came through. That was the one that had the most mainstream push. Obviously, their first 2 albums were more raw. They was laying the foundations, I guess, for those 2 albums. So 98 came up. Limp Bizkit were obviously on the verge of releasing Significant Other in 99. That was when they took off. So I think, yeah, late 98 or mid 98 was where things seemed to change. And then I think the second wave was sort of 2001 when I mentioned there when Linkin Park came up. They and Papa Roach, they were the sort of 2 bands that kind of flew the flag for that era. And then it pretty much all died out by late 2003, early 2004, which was when metalcore came along. Obviously, Trivium, Killswitch Engage, Lamb of God were coming out, that new wave of American heavy metal. So, yeah, nu metal only had maybe 4 or 5, 6 years at the top.
Yeah.
But when you was actually sort of living in that moment, it seemed to last forever because every week there was new bands coming out, there was new albums coming out. It was a magical time. So yeah, from 98, that's where I think it really did sort of pick up. I've mentioned, I was talking to someone the other day, Mike Sarkisian, which is in that zine book. He likened the original era to be classed as LA metal because all the bands that were coming out were based in
Fair
LA.
enough. Yep.
And obviously then when Limp Bizkit came out and Slipknot came out in 99, that was when they sort of had to remove the LA metal tag because these guys were from Florida and Iowa. So that was when nu metal really did sort of kickstart, I think.
Shit.
It's a good way to think about it because
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the high water mark of the first wave to me, honestly, was 98, Ozfest 98, because that's where it literally just exploded. I mean, you have This Is Deftones. They weren't on the Ozfest, but they just toured for Around the Fur. They took Limp Bizkit out with them. Yep. You had, this was Snot, Ultraspank, System of a Down, Kilgore, right? One of those. Tim, we need to talk more about Kilgore because that album is great, and I think we kind of forget about them in the hustle. Incubus, right? I mean, it was wild. But and also I also think there's some of the successes for all these nu metal bands was also at this point, Matt, we were still going to record stores. So going to Tower Records or HMV or Virgin and seeing an end cap with Coal Chamber, Powerman 5000, Incubus, and 5 other bands you've never heard of, you were more than likely going to look at those 5 other bands and say, well, I've never heard of any of this shit, but I know what these 3 are and I like it. So
absolutely.
Let me take a flyer on this. What is this? Snot? Because that's what I bought. I was like, Snot is the name of the band? One of my favorites. But yeah, who knew?
I was the same in terms of, like I said earlier, I only had Kerrang to sort of find out about these bands. And when I did go to my nearest city for their actual record shops, there would be times where I'd, on a hunch, just pick up a CD because of the front cover or the name of the band or the name of the songs. So it was because of them that I'd Floor Through the Eyes, which I still think is one of my favorite albums of all time. I mean, that the band are a train wreck, but that album was just absolutely amazing. Godhead, 2000 Years of Human Error, I picked that one up on a whim. I don't even think I'd heard of Orgy until I picked up the Candy Ass album. So yeah, there were so many albums, like you said, that sort of on the shelves in these record shops, they were sort of related by the way they was presented or on a special stand or something. And yeah, you had a little inkling that you was going to like what you was going to hear, even if it was just a bit of guesswork, really.
Definitely.
And you brought up an interesting point when you talked about the third wave, right, where things started to go towards the end, and then you had the new wave of American metal came in. Metalcore became a big thing. Tim and I later tonight are talking with the guys from Purity, where we're going to talk about the late, almost like the new grunge, right, or the new rock, right, the stuff that was like Flaw, like Finger 11, like Cold, the bands that came in towards the end that were way more radio appropriate.
Yeah.
Either overtly or either inadvertently or overtly, they were more radio appropriate. That there were, I mean, when I was doing research for this show, there were tons. I was finding tons of stuff. Like, I didn't even know half the shit existed.
Yeah.
But it was profligate at that point.
Yeah, there was a very popular era of that. I mean, obviously, Cold came out in 1998, I think it was, with their first album, and then gradually over the next couple of albums, they ended up becoming more of a hard rock post grunge band. But yeah, that wave came along with Seether, Stained, even you could include in that.
Yep.
They did have a few heavier tracks as well. But yeah, 2001, that was when there really was, I think, the biggest diversity of styles. Whereas in the the late 90s, you generally had rap metal, and then either more abrasive metal. Soulfly, for example, still aired on that side of thrash tinged because of Max Cavalera's work with Sepultura. But yeah, I don't think you had as much then as what you did at the turn of the millennium with probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 different subgenres of heavy music, but all rolled into one.
You mentioned Max Cavalera. Did either of you see that meme? It's been making its way around Facebook, and the top says the reunion I got, and it's a picture of Friends, and the bottom says the reunion I really want, and it's a picture of Sepultura.
Yeah.
And I saw this, and I'm like, I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think those wounds go too deep. Andreas just does not sound like he'd be into it. But I would. Oh, can you imagine like seeing them get together and play like a medley of the first 4 albums? It would be bedlam. It would be bedlam.
Yeah, it would sell out in seconds.
Seconds, yes.
Yeah,
seconds.
It probably will. But from what I've heard, I've not sort of seen it with my own eyes, but I think Max and Igor are doing pretty well with the Roots reunions through their own band. But yeah, obviously you can't beat the original thing. It's like anything, as I said, in terms of a lot of the bands these days, perhaps only have one original member or whatever. There's so many out there that, I mean, I've got a friend in a band called Front Street that are based in Holland. They're an amazing new rap metal band. Remy, the guitarist, he's just co-written the new Head PE EP with Jared.
No shit.
So the song that came out last week, I think it was Sandmine, wasn't it? I think so. He's co-written that. He's co-written all the songs. It's his guitar work on it, and it's brilliant. But I remember when they was Head PE was about to announce what was coming up, the amount of people that was calling for the return of the original members, and I think a lot of them seemed to think that was what was going to happen, which obviously it didn't. But yeah, a lot of the time there is reunions where people get over their shit and get together again and, you know, make up. But there seems to be a lot of bands from back then that never could get over their issues, and
right,
why perhaps they're not as popular now for what they could have been. I mean, I would love to have seen the Saliva reunion with Josie Scott. I think
that was happening for a hot minute, wasn't it? And then he was it him that came out and said, yeah, this is not happening?
I think it was the one of the other guys from the band that's actually said that. So I'm not quite sure what's happened with it. Every 6 seconds, I love that album, and I quite like the EP they've just put out, the Every 20 Years EP, which is the re-recordings of some of those songs with Bobby on vocals. They're pretty close to the originals, just obviously given a modern overhaul. But yeah, I would love to have seen Josie back in Saliva. That's one of them that I would love to see.
It does kind of make you wonder, right? Because for a big enough check, I'd basically do just about anything. And if I was in my younger years part of a creative endeavor that resonated with people, and there's people clamoring for me to come back and do it again, 20 years on, because it really is 20 years since most of this stuff was huge. You'd think I'd be able to call up Tim, but like, Tim, look, I know I called you a raging dickhead and you slept with my wife, but there's a big check on the table here, Tim. You think we could, find a way to make it work? I mean, you would think you'd be able to find a way to make it work.
Yeah, possibly as well because of the pandemic. Maybe, for all we know, it would have happened by now had this not come in. I think I don't think bands are naive either in terms of, I think they know what level they got to at one stage rather than, I don't think there's any bands out there that think they're bigger than they were. So whether that's possibly something like Saliva, while that album did go platinum, I don't really think they got on that level, that peak level. So whether they just, club shows, is that enough for them these days? And in terms of the money, all the money that, the expenses that have to be paid out of their checks for, the clubs, the staging, the lighting, and stuff like that. I don't know, but
that's why the festivals are great, right? Because you can say, hey, look, we're going to do a one-off at Rocklahoma, or the other one that's coming up, the what is it, With Full Force or whatever, the one in, I think it's Ohio or something, I don't know. You were talking, Matt, about American festivals. Tim and I have been going back and forth with a couple other guys about going out. Have you seen the lineup? What is it, Psycho Las Vegas?
Yeah. Where
it's like Cannibal Corpse is headlining, but it's Vitriol, it's Pig Destroyer, it's Dying Fetus, it's Misery Index, it's like it's like everybody and anybody, and we've all been like, we're all four of us in our group are like, Vegas, August, outside, but Vitriol, Pig Destroyer, and Dying Fetus on the same stage.
Emperor,
Vegas, outside, and the scales are slowly tipping into this week. It was in our chat group was, all right, let me find us an Airbnb. So we're slowly getting to that point.
I've been to Vegas and I love the place and never saw a gig there. But yeah, if I was, I'm into bands like Pig Destroyer, for example, and I don't mind a bit of Cannibal Corpse. So yeah, especially if I was in America already, then that'd be a no-brainer for me.
So, you talked earlier, Matt, about how, when you were talking about the zine, you said, people were saying to you, well, it looks like you're trying to start a nu metal resurgence. Well, Tim and I made the remark that it kind of just happened organically. Like the idea of not necessarily a resurgence in the sound, although there is that, the resurgence in the ability to talk about this stuff and not be laughed at by everybody else. Right. Yeah. And maybe it's because that nu metal Reddit has blown up. Maybe it's because there's a lot of bands right now getting bands like Tala and Tetrarch and bands that are getting paid attention to that have proud nu metal leanings. But I think it kind of it seems to me like it came out of nowhere in the zeitgeist and it just has grown from there. Like people are, kids who said, oh, I listened to that when I was a kid, they had that nostalgia. Tim and I were like, Jesus, we listened to that when we were in high school. So we have that nostalgia and it's all kind of coming together.
Yeah, I think everybody who witnessed that era firsthand, they just loved it so much and still do now. And they just want to keep talking about it. And there is some people that probably only still listen to nu metal. They didn't want to listen to anything else. So yeah, from what I see on the groups, the Facebook groups, the Instagram pages, hundreds of nu metal groups and stuff that people could just go to and talk about it. And then of course you've got younger kids coming through that are now going back and hearing that music for the first time. So they want to find out more about the bands or, find friends through a relatable, a hobby or interest. And there's a lot of friendships that I've seen made purely online, but because of their loves for nu metal. So yeah,
absolutely.
A few people, like I said, sort of said about me bringing this resurgence. Yeah, I don't for 1 minute. It's not me that's doing it. I know for a fact that, I'm just one of many people that is doing it. And it's good to see. And yeah, hopefully, I was asked this question the other day in terms of the book being, why do a nu metal book? It's the first nu metal book I know of since 2002.
Yeah, there's virtually nothing out there.
Exactly. So hopefully, if someone's got the drive and the interest to do it, then hopefully there might be a few more books come out over the years on it as well. This is just my take on it. But yeah, I'd love for more people. I know I've got a friend in America who is currently writing a book about the nu metal / underground era of Massachusetts area. He was born in somewhere in the area of where Godsmack and Stained come up because they were neighborly. So if Stained were headlining shows, Godsmack would support them and vice versa when they were coming up. he's a big fan of a lot of the underground bands from around that era. So he's currently writing a book about them and reaching out to, some of the musicians. He's got all the rare, because perhaps those bands only released, a couple of hundred CDs at a time or something. And so he's trying to collect all them, and then he's going back and talking to musicians. So I'm glad he's doing that. So yeah, hopefully a few more writers are born out of their love for nu metal.
Shit, we'll have to get him on as well.
Yeah, right. We're going to be rating Matt's Rolodex after this call. But I also think, to that point, Matt, right? People writing books and doing long form prose. I think with our on-demand culture and everything on the internet, you can find everything at the touch of your fingertips. The fact that someone, even to your zine, right? The fact that someone is taking the time to compile this stuff and create it and make it tactile, so someone on the other side can actually spend time with it, makes it all worthwhile, right? There's a different experience that you have with reading something on a website when I'm staring at my monitor versus, the other week, I should say, I finished J.S. Clayton from Pitch Shifter's book, where he kept a tour diary when they toured with Gravity Kills, and it was Gravity Kills and Junkie XL, and then they dropped off and Cold replaced Junkie XL, but it was their American dates. So he kept, like, every day he was making a diary, and it was really kind of neat to see it. You read it, and it was some pictures in there and funny stories, and I think he autographed it. But like, there's a draw for that there, because it's not disposable culture, which is honestly what the internet is.
Yeah, like you said, it's easy enough to go online and get some information. But at least, from my point of view, if I was the fan, I'd love to have it all in one book there. So I'm not going to say I've got every piece of information in the book. I've not got every single nu metal band there ever has been. But if I was a fan that wanted to hear a little bit more about a band like Scrape, for example, or Simon Says, those sort of lower level bands, this nu metal book features those. So it's more of a reference book, I guess. And then in terms of the zine, I mentioned Kerrang's not been the same for years. I mean, they feature more indie music now than anything, which is annoying. They still love Slipknot. They all of a sudden they sort of started liking Limp Bizkit again when they came back, and despite trashing them for years on end. So yeah, in terms of the Kerrang thing, that's partly why I did the zine, because I wanted to create it as a fan, and sort of include the stuff that I'd like to read in a magazine.
Well, let me ask you this, Matt. Out of all, I mean, you've come across bazillions of nu metal bands. What are one of the bands that you really like, that you were really surprised they didn't get bigger than they did?
Flaws Through the Eyes, as I said a few minutes ago, I still think is an amazing album. Probably still will forever be in my top 5 nu metal albums. But after speaking to certain members, it's easy to see why, because the lead singer was an absolute train wreck and still is today.
Yeah.
So it's a shame, I guess. I've got a CD collection next to me, all nu metal, just trying to think. I mean, there was a band called Pulse Ultra, who the guitarist and founding member, Dominic Cifarelli, he's going to be in the next zine. He's going to be talking about the Pulse Ultra years. I love them. They were the first band I ever saw live. They were supporting Taproot over here on the Welcome Tour.
Oh, wow.
They only did the one album, but that was a different album for the time, because they used, odd time structures and different layers to their music. They was technically superior to a lot of the nu metal bands coming out as well. While they did get on Atlantic Records, unfortunately, they only lasted for one album. I think there was a bit of a merger between the labels and the managements, and they kind of got lost in the shuffle. In Slaves on Dope, I really liked especially their first 2 albums. They did Metaphor, which was their second one. There's loads of bands that should have been bigger. Third Strike, they're another one who I really liked. But a lot of that, I think, is down to the fact that illegal downloading came in during the nu metal's height, and that's what ultimately thwarted so many of them, because the album sales, or the lack of, led to the labels, kicking a lot of the bands off their rosters, even though it wasn't the band's fault ultimately.
Right. The majors signed me because I sounded like you, and you were already a platinum selling artist, so they kind of figured they would ride the wave. And again, putting my CD next to yours in the end cap, people buy it. And then what was it? I guess what was first? Napster was first, and then that comes out and
Yeah.
it basically shoots everything right in the ass. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, what am I doing?
Exactly. And unless you was a band like Korn, who suffered with the sales of Untouchables, even though they still did good numbers originally, but unless you are on a level like Korn, there wasn't many that got a second chance to go back and do another album and see if they could, repair the
Right.
damage done from the album before it.
Right.
It's a shame, but
Fred Durst quote where he talked about how, at the turn of the century, there was 15 million people who were fans of my band. And then a couple of years later, there were 3. And that wasn't their fault. Right. I mean, but like illegal downloads and all that sort of stuff. Did either of you ever read that article? Or there's a book, it's How Music Got Free. It's the story of how, it's a story of like the rise of file sharing and all that, but there was one guy, they can trace it back to one guy who worked in a CD plant in Ohio. And like they would get the master of the new Britney Spears album on like a Thursday. And, it's coming out the next Tuesday. And he would tell stories where he would just take a copy home. He'd go to a party that weekend. He'd put it in the machine and everybody would like, what is this? And he's like, well, it's a new Britney Spears album, but it doesn't come out till Tuesday. Yeah, well, I got a copy of it. Oh, do you mind if I rip it? So it was file sharing, but I think also it ties to computing power got to the point where you could rip a CD and it wouldn't take like 9 hours. It would probably take an hour, but to get something for free a week early.
Yeah, it's funny as well, just in touching on, there is an interview with Harold Montague from Taproot. And he actually was talking about how when they came over to the UK, they were supporting Deftones and Linkin Park on a tour over here. And they did a signing session in Scotland. And he said that the amount of kids that actually brought copied CDs to the signings was, just crazy.
Like a home burned CD.
Wow.
Yeah. He was saying, you want us to sign a CD which you've made for free. We've not got a single penny. He said they used to sign the CDs and sort of bite their tongue, but he said that there was a lot of that going on. And if that was just Taproot, imagine how many more there probably was as well.
Can you imagine like doing that at like a true on hardcore show? Like Jamie Josta signed my burn CD, he'd punch you right in the face.
I think he would, yeah.
I can't even imagine. So Matt, let's talk a little bit about the book. You said it comes out shortly, and this is the 3rd version. What's the title?
So this one is, Nu Metal, a definitive guide. So this is effectively Resurgence, but further updated, more interviews in there, more features. From what the pre-order listing says on Amazon, we're looking at probably 250 pages of nu metal goodies. So yeah, this is the final one I'm going to be doing. So effectively, it is a sequel to Resurgence, but thankfully, because I got a publisher on board this time, we've got worldwide distribution. So it drops in the UK on July the 29th, and then September the 24th, America and the rest of the world.
So I'd have to order it from the UK and then have it shipped international, which isn't necessarily the worst thing.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I'm going to get. I've only got 4 copies. I'm going to actually get myself, so there will be 4 copies available for sale. But I'm not quite sure what the deal is with the American, the delay compared to the UK. But there's about a 2-month wait. So it is available. I've seen it's available for pre-order on Amazon all over the world, available in Walmart, Barnes and Noble in terms of American listeners if they want to check it out. So if you just search Nu Metal, a definitive guide, then it should pop up. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So we'll put some links out there to whatever we can find. Tim, what else you got?
I found it. Yep. Pre-order. There we go.
Fantastic. It's funny you were talking about like some of the late stage stuff. Tim and I just did an interview with a really young guy, Orion, who came up with this list of, we said, let's talk about all the obscure stuff. And literally he came out with a list of shit that I had never heard of in my life. And it was like arm's length list. Yeah. And I mean, I made the kind of snarky comment. In hindsight, it really was snarky, but I think it's definitely indicative of that sound where it got to a point where all the bands either sounded like Primer 55 or Taproot. Like that's the point where it kind of got to, where it wasn't the 97, 98, 99 Halcyon days where you're trying to find a needle in a stack of needles. you were trying to find a needle in the Mariana Trench, because they
Mhm.
all kind of sounded alike, and it's kind of tough. And I understand why some of those bands didn't do as well as they did, because when you're a
Yeah.
copy of a copy of a copy, it gets like back to the zine conversation, right? When you're looking at a third-hand copy of a zine on newspaper, it's kind of falling apart.
Yeah. I was gonna ask though about like, do you see this staying as big as it is now? Like, not that it's huge, but like, do you see the resurgence getting bigger and bigger, or do you see it just, going out in a couple of years and then maybe 10 years later it comes back again? Like, is there gonna be a wave that just keeps happening every 10 years, or is this here to stay, you think?
I think it'll stay as long as the original bands that are still going hang around.
Got you.
So yeah, in terms of the touring circuit, I think it is likely to stay, because the bands, they still want to get out there and play to fans, especially to the fans that perhaps missed the band's first time round. There's such a healthy load of new bands coming out, which will always, I think, carry the flag for nu metal. Of course, we're never going to get the chart success and the record sales. That's impossible in today's climate. Streaming will help, but yeah, you won't get the gold and platinum certifications or chart success. So I think it's going to be more based on the touring aspect of it, I think, and then it will be left to the newer bands that will. There's so many newer bands that are just constantly putting song after song after song out.
Yeah.
Like there's 2 or 3 bands that I can think of just now that they've done perhaps 2 EPs in a year and new singles, or an album and new singles. They just, constantly writing new stuff. Whereas, Korn, they'll probably still keep putting an album out every 3 years, however many they've got left in them, I don't know. I know they've talked briefly, they've written a new album during lockdown, but they're also they're going to know basically when their time is up. So maybe Korn perhaps only have another decade left. I mean, obviously they are in their 50s, most of them, if not all of them now. Limp Bizkit, whether we'll ever get another album from them. If we do, I think that would be the last one.
Oh, I have my fingers so hard crossed for a Limp Bizkit resurgence, right? Especially what's going on with our culture, where everybody is so politically correct. There is a space for a completely irreverent, obnoxious band to come out. Everybody the middle finger, right? And
absolutely
holding out hope.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, I still think they're an incredible live band. I've seen them 2 or 3 times over the last 4 or 5 years, and they still put on a great show. Will we get another Mudvayne album after they do their few shows later in the year? Perhaps they might just do one more album like Cold Chamber did when they reformed. They got one more out of their system and that was it. So I think there'll still be, still some of the original era bands. They're going to keep going with releasing music, but I don't think it's not going to be at that level. It's impossible to ever get to that level again.
How much of this resurgence is due to the fact that writing or recording music is so easy now, and you have all the kids that were born in the heyday that are now 17, 18. They have the accessibility to record and stuff, and they're just starting to hear albums like Follow the Leader and stuff. So I think a lot of the resurgence has to do with stuff like that, and that's why I think you're seeing it getting so big, and especially bands like Zone Zero and stuff like that. They're younger guys, so I just think that has a huge it's huge because of reasons like that, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like you said, you can make music on your computers now. Zone Zero, I think they've got a really good sound, and the production of their music is really good as well.
Absolutely.
And then there is other bands. I go back to Front Street. You would have, when you listen to their music, you'd think that's been produced in a studio with, I don't know, Don Gilmore or something. And and they've spent thousands and thousands of euros on it in their case, but it's not. It's all done at home on the computers, and luckily they can back it up live. That's what a lot of people seem to say separates the good bands from the bad. It's whether they can actually portray it live. And but a lot of these bands seem to. There's many that I'm never going to be able to see because they are overseas or whatever. But from the videos and of the live recordings that I've seen, there is a lot of talent out there, raw talent, that they can back up their pristine recordings with very good live shows.
I think there's a band, they're not nu metal, but I think they're going to go that route soon. And they're actually from over there, is Architects. I think that band is getting huge, and I think eventually we're going to get a new metal record from them. Kind of like a Bring Me to Horizon way. You know what I mean? Because if you listen to their new record, they have songs that are already veering into that area. And that band's absolutely incredible. So
yeah, my girlfriend's a big fan of those. She absolutely loves them, and she plays the new album constantly. They traditionally are a metalcore sort of mathcore band, but they did I remember it was when I was in America. I traveled the country for about 6 weeks 10 years ago, and Architects had just released the album The Here and Now, I think it was, and that was the first time there where they kind of went slightly more mainstream with the clean vocals and the melodies and the strong choruses, and then they went back to their metalcore roots for the last few albums. And the new album has kind of gone back to that Here and Now era. So
absolutely.
and Bring Me the Horizon are an incredible band. I think they're probably one of the more original bands to come out of the last 10, 20 years, especially over the UK. The new EP they put out last year, that survival horror or whatever it was called, the songs on there were just amazing. They're a brilliant band as well. I
can't believe they got huge. Like they're one of those bands I look back when they first came out and I'm like, really that like another band that I never got, but is massive. August Burns Red from the States. They're huge, and I'm like, my buddy Troy is a huge fan, and I'm like, really, they're a big name? Because weren't they originally like Christian metalcore, like back in the day?
They're actually not far from us.
No, they're from around here. Yeah.
I've only recently, the last sort of 3 or 4 months, really got into them, and they're not the sort of band I normally would get into, because I do like sort of strong choruses and predominantly clean vocals. But August Burns Red are pretty much a metalcore band, but they don't use choruses, and they use different structures and that. But there's something about them that I really like. And I've just on their social medias, they've got over 1 million followers. And there's a couple of people I've seen that sort of say I really don't get what they're all about. But yes, for some reason they clicked with me. But then there's other bands that I don't like, that everybody does. I've never been a fan of like Green Day and My Chemical Romance and Foo Fighters. I've never been a fan of those. And so it just shows everybody's
got their own taste. One of the things Tim and I have talked about a lot lately, Matt, is how genres have blended. So I won't say extremely, but so the point where there is new metal tinges in just about everything, especially for younger bands who are putting out music these days. So for example, Tim and I are putting together an episode on where we're going to talk about new deathcore. So the deathcore stuff that has blatant new metal influence. And I told Tim, okay, so the way we typically do these is I build a podcast and I build a playlist in Spotify. I have a bunch of stuff we're going to chat about. Tim goes in and gives some listens, and I'm having a tough time drawing a line. Like, is this really new metal influenced deathcore, or is this just straight deathcore? Because that line is very blurry.
It is.
Yeah. And a lot of the bands probably did come up. I mean, Cane Hill, for example, a lot of their stuff is extremely abrasive and aggressive, but they effectively were new metal kids. And there's a band that I was talking to one of the members yesterday. They're going to be in the next zine called Silent Type, based in Australia. And to listen to them, I mean, their influences are all over the place, but bands like sort of grindcore bands sometimes come to mind when you listen to some of their newer music, but they class themselves as aggressive new metal.
Well, Pig Destroyer's album before that was
you
new metal.
To it.
Yeah, I mean,
you beat me to it. But Head Cage, there's some new metal parts to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And even original bands that have perhaps been going 10, 20, 30 years, that even those are at times are including those sort of elements into their music. I mean, if Metallica could include the Southern rock influences that they did on Load and Reload, then I guess any band these days can just pop back. Obviously, electronics is a big popular thing these days, which a lot of the new metal bands ended up flirting with at some stage as well. So even hearing Jonathan Davis rap occasionally in Korn, they incorporated that in the end. So yes, I guess some are happy to just repeat the formula, but others want to keep expanding and trying new things. And new metal was such a diverse palette that I guess it's easy to draw from something that was used in that era to to sort of bring back today.
Yeah, I mean, it worked once, right? It worked the first time, and now you have a whole new set of ears, right? I mean, now when and you talked, Matt, about how there's all these Facebook groups that talk about nu metal. Like when I see someone post, it makes me feel, dude, it makes me feel fucking old. When I see someone post like, yeah, you know, this is a picture of my dad when he was 18, and he's got like an OG Slipknot t-shirt on that I had, and I'm like, oh my God, like, am I? Yeah. I'm old. This is like, this is terrible.
Yeah, my niece just graduated high school yesterday. You know how old I feel?
Oh, man.
I felt old yesterday because I think it was the 2002, 19 years since Untouchables came out.
God damn.
And I was telling the story that...
Jesus, has it really been almost 20 years?
Yeah, and I was telling the story that on that day it came science exam in the morning.
You, both of you guys froze. I thought it was you guys.
No, it was you, dude. You were frozen on my head like this. It's kind of all right. So we're recording. All right, so we'll take it up. So Matt was just talking about, and for those listeners, you know, we had a little bit of technical difficulties. Matt was talking about like botching an exam to go pick up a CD, right? That's another thing that as a truly ages us, right? Like I remember going on those Tuesdays when it was new release day, you know, having to go to the store. And I remember there used to be a CD guy that would come to the student center in my college, and it would only be major releases, and it was $10 a CD. And granted, this is the late 90s, but when it was, what was the one that came? Was it Issues that came after Follow the Leader?
I believe so.
Yes, it was. Yeah,
Issues, but I remember sending my girlfriend at the time, who was still in college, to the student center with a list on Tuesdays with like $50 in cash and a list, and saying if anything they got of this, bring it back. But yeah, it's kind of wild. Well, listen, Matt, I know it's getting late for you and put in a full day of work. So if people will wrap us up with, if people want to find more information about the zine, that people want to find more information about the book, they want to pre-order it, where do they go?
So the Nu Zine, I have an Instagram page, which is _nu, as in NU, _zine_official. If you want to pick up, I've officially sold out completely of issue 1 now, but if you want to pick up a copy of issues 2 and 3 before the 4th one drops, it's the nuzine.bigcartel.com. And in terms of the Nu Metal Definitive Guide book, that is available for pre-order now. Amazon's your best bet, whether you're in UK, most of Europe, and America, of course. Also in America, Walmart and Barnes and Noble. And if your listenership extends over to Australia, the only place I've seen over there is Booktopia. But yeah, just have a look through America and UK. You know, yeah, Amazon's the best bet.
All right. Awesome. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day. Tim and I, this has been an awesome conversation. We look forward to having you on again after the book officially comes out in the States. We'll do a read. Maybe we'll do a live event. Who knows? We'll figure something out. But again, we really want to thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. For our listeners, once again, thanks for tuning in. If you like what you've heard, give us a review, a rating, podcast, Podbean, whatever, Apple Podcasts, whatever they all call each other now. Find us on Instagram at newbreed_podcast. To Twitter is the same. We have a Facebook group, which actually I've had to add some membership questions to because people thought we were some new breed rapper from the UK who is a Christian.
Never heard of him. I've never heard of him.
It's quite interesting. We have an interesting fan base on our Facebook group. I'll tell you that. If you have suggestions, feedback, comments, newbreedpodcasts@gmail.com. So once again, I want to thank Matt on behalf of Tim, myself. We want to say cheers, and we'll see you again soon.
Definitely. Thanks again, man.